It's right at noon, so welcome everybody. To just echo what Joan just said, thank you, Lynn, for joining us for contract training. I know there's a lot of questions agents have had recently and in the past about appraisals and how they work, specifically with like some nuances in figuring out the value of properties, and any insight you can really give us into what's it like out in the market right now? Like, what are you seeing? And what should we be thinking about when we go to list properties? So thank you, Lynn, and I'll let you take it from there.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today. I hope I can be helpful. And I think communication is always the key, and we work so closely together for us to understand each other better. Is helpful to both of us to get the deal done. So I'll just talk briefly. I was born and raised in the Milwaukee metro area, graduated from UW Milwaukee, and then I moved to Chicago, where I lived for 7 years. I attended the Appraisal Institute, and that was when you sat in a lecture hall and took real tests, with paper and so on. And I became a licensed appraiser in Wisconsin in 1994. And since that time, I've been practicing in the 4-county region: Milwaukee County, Ozaukee, Washington, and Waukesha. So I've gained a lot of knowledge, as you have to do. Every 2 years, we have continuing education to maintain our, license to the state of Wisconsin. Our goal, or my goal personally, is always to make a deal rather than break a deal. As you know, some deals are easy to get to go through, and some are more complex. I think whenever you as an agent realize that you're kind of riding the line, or things might, not really be as smooth as they could be, it's always good to let us know. I'll start with, there are 3 approaches to value. I don't know how much of this you already know, but I'll be brief, and then you can always ask questions and I can expand later on. So most commonly, we have the sales comparison approach, which I'm sure is what you're, most often used to, where we compare. And then I don't know how many of you have actually looked through and poured over an appraisal and tried to analyze it and understand it. But on the first page, we really document a lot of information about the subject property. Then on the second page is where we put in the comparables, and we are required to have a minimum of 3 closed sales, ideally really recent. They want 2 that are in real changing markets, in the last 90 days, and absolutely within 6 months. Then we move on to some actives and some listings, and they like to see what's going on with those. And we typically have between a minimum of 3 to 4 comparables, and generally up to 6, can be more. Then we have the cost approach, which we are required to complete in properties that have been constructed in the last 2 years. And sometimes maybe if a property is really fully renovated, we might also include that. And that information we typically get from the Marshall and Swift Residential Cost Handbook, or other clearinghouses of information like that. And then, of course, there's the income approach, and I'm sure you've all listed or sold 2 to 4 unit properties. And with a residential license, either license or certification, I am certified, you can only appraise up to 4 units. So once you go beyond 4 units, then you would be using a commercial appraiser for those properties. So those are the 3 approaches to value. And then the 4 things we always try to bracket as best we can. And this is something where I often get a whole bunch of comps from an agent, and they'll give me all properties that have sold higher than the subject. Well, the lender doesn't want to see that the subject is the lowest bottom property. So keep that in mind. We want to tuck the subject in. What the lender wants to feel like is if they get stuck with the mortgage, they can unload the house rather than have to carry that mortgage for some time. So they want to see that the property is typical, that it appeals to the general market, that it's not unusual. So if it falls at the highest end or the lowest end, what's going on? That's what they don't want to see. So when you hand an appraiser comparables, put, you know, one or two of them that sold for a little less and a couple of that are that sold a little high. That's where we're supposed to go with it. Then the other couple of things that we want to bracket are the lot size. So we want a bigger lot and a smaller lot. We want to bracket the square footage, a larger house and a smaller house, and lot size, square footage, and then the sale price. So then the property is tucked in, and that makes the lender feel comfortable making this loan. That means that probably appeals to the greatest amount of people in the general market area. When we run a CMA, typically we'll do within 1 mile. That's what they'd like to see. Sometimes if you're in the city, well, you get 300 properties that are active or listed within 1 mile. Well, that's too many to really get a good analysis. So then you might say just bungalows because the subject is a bungalow or something like that to tighten that up and be more comparable. So then, okay, so you asked, one question you asked about is how I adjust for differences between 3 and 4 bedroom houses. So much of what we do is objective and so much is subjective. So in a really competitive market, like maybe Whitefish Bay, where houses just sell almost no matter what the market is, I don't adjust for 3 to 4 bedroom houses. I think a typical buyer in a tight market like we have now, where there are a limited number of available properties, they're going to take either. They can do things to, you know, 2 kids have to share a room. They can finish the basement and put in an egress window. They're going to have to flex if, you know, so in that case, I don't adjust. In the case of a property that has 2 bedrooms, I'm really looking for 2 bedroom comps. You know, or if it has 5 bedrooms, I'm going to try to include something else that has, you know, 4, 5, 6 bedrooms, because those are sort of unusual. Those fall kind of outside of the typical. A 3 to 4 bedroom house, that's typical. And I think that when we have an oversupply of properties, well, yeah, then you're able to include just 4 bedroom houses for a 4 bedroom house. So that is something that's somewhat subjective. As far as a finished basement goes, of course, we look for comparables that have a finished basement as well. Basement is adjusted separately from above grade square footage. That's absolutely across the board mandatory. You can have a very nicely finished basement. You can have a walkout finished basement. But if you look at the appraisal grid and are familiar with our USPAP, Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, we really have to segregate above and below grade out as different. Now, a finished basement can have a lot of value. You know, you can walk out to a swimming pool or you know, a patio, and it can be something where there are bedrooms and well-finished bathrooms, and that does provide a lot of value, but it cannot be included in the above grade finished square footage. Let's see. Then I wanted to, does anybody want to ask any questions as far as what I've said so far?
Yeah, I have a quick one. Obviously, since there's not many listings, sometimes it's really difficult to find comps that have been within the 90 to 6 month window. So do you just, like, for example, try and find the absolute best, or do you have to expand your timeline or your window?
Well, we will need to explain whatever we expanded. If they just aren't, then they just aren't. Then we need to just, you know, we're given room on the appraisal to write sentences and paragraphs and things like that. And we just have to explain what's happening in the market. So for example, what I might do is, if we're talking about a ranch style house, I might then have to throw in a Cape Cod. I would try to avoid a 2-story when I'm doing a ranch style house. But if I'm doing a Cape Cod or a bungalow, then I might have to throw in a ranch or a colonial or something like that, just to help those meet those state guidelines. And then when we do have a shortage, then I might end up with 6, 7, 8 comps where I have to meet all those requirements. and really make the lender feel tucked in.
How would you weigh, like, I have a specific property that, for example, is a 2-bedroom ranch, kind of like a luxury style, where few in that complex go on market, maybe like 3 a year or so. Typically, this one's a 2-bedroom ranch. Typically, they are 3 bedrooms that go on the market. The 2 bedrooms a little bit more rare. Would you just include those, and because it's the closest you can, pretty much?
As far as I'm assuming this is a condominium, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So they generally like to have 2 closed sales within the complex and 1 active in the complex. If that's not available, I have to explain it.
Gotcha.
So then I'll expand, and I'll use what we have in the complex and describe them. And in our market where it is tight, maybe people don't care. A lot of the people who are buying condominiums and luxury condominiums, we have an aging population. A lot of them have kids out of the nest. They may not care. Then, is the basement finished? What else can we add to make the lender feel comfortable with this loan with a 2-bedroom? And then I'll also look out farther, maybe distance wise, to find something that does have 2-bedroom, that is a luxury, and that's around that quality and condition and price range.
Got
Just
it.
I mean, I had a weird sale on a new construction in Germantown. I ended up throwing one in from Franklin just because that was just so much like it, and the market was just too tight. But I explained it's an outlying suburb. It has general market appeal. It's the same age, same size, same quality, and appeals to the general market. And that was like the 7th or 8th comp. But I did just want to make them feel comfortable. So that's the best we could do. Any other questions? Then I'll go on.
I have a question. It comes up quite a bit in our calls. What effect does multiple offers on a property have for an appraisal for a lender? Is that a factor that you look at?
Well, we're in a market right now where we have a shortage of available housing stock. I was talking to someone at Frisco Fairway, and he did an analysis, or he read something maybe from CoreLogic or something, that the Milwaukee metro market is over 6,000 units short of what the buyers are, how many properties we need to house the people that are looking for houses. So we are getting multiple offers on so many properties. It's certainly something that I think is worth sharing with the appraiser, but it doesn't really impact, and I'll, might include that, they had multiple offers over asking. When I do the CMA analysis, I do write, look at how short the listing days on market are, for listings and sales. That most, and I'll write, look, all 3 of these closed sales sold over 20,000 over list price. I mean, I think that's more what the lender wants to hear. Lots of people can offer money on a property, but can they actually make the loan and close the property? So that's where it doesn't really impact what we're doing here. The lender is only concerned with this one house or property and this one buyer, and do they have what it takes to purchase the property, and is this justified in the market? That's more what we need to show to them. Does that make sense?
That's good.
Yeah, I do have a question kind of expanding on that. As an agent, we can't really tell the lender, or sorry, the appraiser. All we can tell them is that we had multiple over asking, right?
Sure. I mean, I think that's appropriate.
Yeah, because we can't disclose like the obviously dollar quantity, even if they're all falling within like the same realm, essentially.
I think, you and I both know that's typical right now. Multiple offers over list, but you can say, we had 11 offers over asking, or something like that. And I can report that, and sometimes do, but and that's great. but it's not really relevant to these people buying this property. It does make the lender feel good knowing they can probably turn around and sell it if these people default. So, I mean, I guess that sort of is helpful, but otherwise, they're just looking at this specific buyer and the specific property and, you know, what's going to happen with that.
Got it.
So. Very good. Anything else? And then I'll go on.
I
Okay.
just want to ask one question. I was just funny enough, right? When I tuned in, I was just getting off the phone with an appraiser. He was asking about the terms of the offer. So I was kind of curious to know what you do with that information.
Well, actually, they really shouldn't be asking you that, because when we receive an appraisal order, they are required by law to provide us with the contract. So that appraiser should have received a copy of the contract and should be reviewing it to know if, for example, appliances are included or repairs are going to be made, or if there are closing cost concessions. All those things are things that we need to be aware of and take into consideration. So
he was asking about, he just wanted to make sure nothing changed with the terms when he called. His report's going to be ready tomorrow. But
right.
I was kind of curious to know why he wanted to make sure that he was getting the right terms, like relevant to any like equity gift, my gift to the seller, and a seller contribution. So he's like really wanting to make sure he got those numbers right for some reason. I was just kind of curious to know why.
If there have been any, you know, changes or amendments that weren't up, you know, that if he, you know, has the latest information and report to you, I have this contract price, I have these closing cost concessions, has anything changed? And that should be the end of the conversation.
Okay, it's interesting.
I also have a question, just as an appraiser, do you have access to MLS? And
Yes.
can you see the documents that are attached as well as the private comments?
Yes, all of those.
Great.
And then I typically use the wire data. I verify through a second source. So you're familiar with the wire data. That's like the kind of the second page that often comes with the listing sheet or is available. It's where I can get the taxes, the legal description, the year built and things like that, unless more rural properties don't include that. Some municipalities don't. And then I'll go to the assessor or associated appraisal or accurate appraisal, because some municipalities farm out their assessment information, and where I verify the basement square footage, which we're required to, you know, verify, and in year built and lot size and things like that.
Do
So,
you
yeah.
also look at the inspection if it's attached as well?
The home inspection report?
Yes. If there's a pre-listing home inspection?
Sure, I do. I look at, I'm slow, I'm old, and I look at everything I can to get the most information I can. I've never had any judgment against me or anybody, you know, file a claim against me as far as what I've done. But I always think in the back of my mind that's possible. So we're required to maintain a work file of what we did on this appraisal. And I believe that if I were put in front of a judge and asked a lot of serious questions, I would be able to answer them appropriately and wouldn't be in trouble because I've done my due diligence. So I think
Thank you.
that's important. Sure. And we're well paid. So we should do the work and be thorough. So, okay, now I'm going to just talk about how we can work together better. So as far as meeting an appraiser, in general, I would say it's not necessary. If you feel that it is, you know, that's fine. As I said, don't bring, you know, all these pages of comps. We can look up the photos and things like that. What would be great is if you just handed me a single sheet, let's save the earth, with MLS numbers and, you know, like a 1-page line report of some comps you used or think are helpful. That's great. Then I could go back to my office, type in those MLS numbers real quick and have those pop open and see if there's something that I missed. But printing out 15 pages of color photos simply isn't necessary. Now, in the case of a property that's rented or in FHA loans, things like that, I do appreciate if someone can meet me there. I have been yelled at. I have had people very upset with me that I'm taking photos of their stuff. So in those cases with renters, and sometimes they're being displaced, you know, I mean, they've been paying their rent, they've been living there for a long time, and now they have to move out because the sellers decided to sell the property. So in those cases, I really appreciate someone meeting me. I think that it's helpful. During the pandemic, I certainly had some issues with people refusing to leave or refusing to mask because they were in their own homes. So things like that can be helpful. If you're meeting the appraiser and turning all the lights on, that's great. Please don't park in front of the house or in the driveway. We are required to take photos going both directions, you know, on the street, and then from both angles of the subject property. So if you can just park, you know, in front of the next door or something like that, that's helpful. And then anytime you come across an elderly seller or a hoarder or anything else like that, it's great if you just let us know there's a lot of stuff in the house or whatever, so we can be a little bit better prepared. If the people have pets, the pets really need to, I love to play, I love animals, but I can't, you know, be like tripping over someone or, and they know we're not there to play. You know, I'm not a friend, and they sometimes sense that, and a non-aggressive animal has become aggressive towards me because they know I'm not there to visit and play and things like that. So if a pet can be put in the car for 10 minutes or taken for a walk, that's great. The other thing is we need to take photos from the rear of the property from both angles. So what they really want to see is like kind of all four sides of the house. So if I shoot this way, this way, this way, and this way, then I'm showing everything. There's, you know, nothing weird or no building right up against it or anything like that. And that's what they need to see. So if the dog poop can be picked up, that would be great. I've had dog poop on my shoes a lot, and I have to carry extra shoes in my car for that. Just a side note. Then, as you know, as far as HUD loans go, they're more complex. They require additional work on our part, and we typically get paid a little bit more for those. Peeling paint, that's going to have to be fixed if the house was constructed before they stopped using lead-based paint, and was it 1977? And so you usually will have a lead-based paint addendum. But if you go and look at the basement window wells, the trim around the basement windows, if there's peeling paint there, that's going to hold up, and I'm going to have to do a final inspection, and that's going to cost the lender more or the seller more money. So these kinds of things, we want to always kind of nip them in the bud. There need to be functional smoke and CO2 detectors on every level of the house, including, you know, down by the basement, in the basement, usually it's the basement, where the furnace and the water heater are. And I'm going to test those and make sure that there are batteries in them. So when they've just flipped a house and renovated it, a lot of times they haven't put those up yet, or they haven't put batteries in them. That's again a red flag, and I'm going to have to come back and do a final inspection. There need to be handrails on all staircases of more than 2 steps. So if there are steps coming up to the house outside, there needs to be a handrail out there. And then, you know, going down to the basement as well. All the appliances and the mechanicals have to be on. If the house is winterized, they have to come back and turn that on for the appraisal. And I'm supposed to turn on the water and take a picture of the water being on, things like that, and the lights being on, and the thermostat, and, you know, with a number on it. So all those things are supposed to be happening when the appraiser is there. Does anybody have any questions about that? And then the last, okay.
I do have a follow-up question. That's the case of all properties. That's not just an FHA appraisal, correct?
What question?
That's, I mean, having mechanicals on, having handrails, having
No, it's not.
oh, it's not. Oh, okay. So that's when you're doing an FHA level appraisal. Got it.
Right.
Okay.
And then the last thing is I need to go up into the attic or scuttle or pull down the drop stair, and I keep a ladder in my car and take a photo in there. It's the worst part of my job because it's kind of tough, and sometimes I'm in a vacant house and there's no heat on or very low heat, and I'm dragging a heavy ladder up to the second floor, and I'm right on top of the staircase and thinking, oh, this is how I'm gonna die. I'm gonna be at the bottom of these stairs. Anyway, that's a side note. So those are the things that that are required for a HUD loan. And if you ever have any questions, it's best to communicate with the appraiser and, you know, be sure that you have all your ducks in a row, because these things can be delayed. I've had multiple final inspections on some where they, you know, had some contractor who just didn't really understand it. And I'm talking to an agent who's talking to an agent who's talking to a contractor who's talking to the guy that's actually going to the house, and there was a disconnect. So that's something certainly we want to try to avoid. Let's see. What else did I have on my list? Oh, we were going to talk about bedrooms. A bedroom, according to USPAP standards guidelines, is required to be 70 feet with at least one wall being 7 feet. It's required to have its own door. It can't be a walk-through, a window, and a closet. Now, when we go into the city and look at our, you know, old houses that were built in, you know, 1917 or something like that, a lot of them didn't have closets. So then I'll try to find comparables that have the same thing, but it's really hard to find those because people don't always report them, and people don't always take photos of the lack of a closet. Or, I mean, once in a while they say the third bedroom is a walkthrough, and maybe that's to let the buyer know. But that's where we get into sort of a complicated thing as far as the appraisal guidelines and what's allowed. Then the other thing is it has to have at least 50% of that 70 feet needs to be at least 7 feet tall. So in the case of our old Cape Cods and bungalows, we've got slope. And just to complicate things, and this is really something that a lot of appraisers are kind of upset about, is on April 1st of 2022, so just over a year ago, they changed our standard measurement guidelines to ANSI standard measurements. And ANSI was established in 1918 and has been used as a standard of measurement, you know, in construction and things like that, but the appraisers were never required to use that. The issue with that is, so when we are in our Cape Cods and our bungalows and things, I'm not allowed to include that square footage of that lower sloped area. And that's unfortunate because we don't know. I'm comparing apples to apples, I hope, with the comparables, but we don't know what standard the comparable measurements were taken with that are provided to us by the assessor or on wire data or something like that. So you see where the catch is. We want to compare apples to apples, but we don't know what we're really looking at. The assessor's goal is to tax on the most square footage possible. So it's more likely that they're including that square footage in their what they're taxing on. Does that make sense to people? So having to cut that off from the subject property is difficult. It complicates what we're doing. The ANSI standard measurement guidelines are online, and if you do a lot of those kinds of properties, I would suggest you just take a quick browse through them. It's 17 pages, our new guidelines, but there are some good sketches of what we're not allowed to include. So also in the case of newer construction properties, big 2 stories where they have the 2-story foyer, we have to cut out that second floor because you can't walk into it. That's open space. That's not included in the square footage. Some appraisers have always been doing that. It really does make sense, but we don't know what the comparables have and what the assessor is reporting for those. So that can be an issue, even in the same subdivision, for example. So those are some things I wanted to make you aware of. Does anybody have any questions?
Real quick, do you have a quick link to those guidelines? Is there a PDF online that?
There is, and it's on my desktop, but not on my laptop.
Okay.
However, when we're finished here, I can certainly send it to Kathleen, and
Perfect.
she can. Oh, she got it there already.
Oh, someone's got it.
Yeah. And I'm not that good of a Zoomer, so that if I
I got
jumped
it.
off, I might not jump back.
I think we've got it. Thank you so much.
Sure. But that would be helpful for you to understand, sometimes you get a seller who's really sure they have the most fabulous property and that there's so many square feet, and actually you kind of have to bring them back down to earth and say, you know what, the appraiser's not going to include this or this, and the basement is separate and things like that, just so they understand, what the process is.
Sure.
Any other questions?
I'm sorry, I did come in about 3 minutes late to this call, but can you explain again basement square footage? If it's finished or with a bedroom, it doesn't count as the square foot total?
If you look at it counts as value, but on the actual appraisal report, if you look at, it's typically page 2 for a single family, page 3 for a condominium, both of those might, apply here. They're separated out. So above grade square footage is in one box, and then below grade square footage and finish and so on is in another box. So we're just required to make adjustments to above grade and then make adjustments to below grade. Certainly a finished basement with an egress, with a bedroom, with a walkout, whatever, has more value than one that isn't finished, but it's just in a different, category on the report. That help?
So that means if you were looking at price per square foot, it would be less price per square foot for a living area, living room in the basement or in the lower level and the upper level.
In general, yes, but some people finish their basements with really high quality or equal quality, in which case I would maybe make that kind of, make a more similar adjustment and make less of a difference. And then I would make a note in the appraisal that this is a high quality, basement finish, equal, or virtually equal to what's finished above grade.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions?
I have a question regarding the comment about closets and bedrooms.
Sure.
What constitutes a closet? I guess, is that something pretty standard, or because I've seen things both ways, and someone was telling me that a closet isn't necessary anymore, and I was shocked. So I didn't know if there was a change recently, or if a bedroom really can be counted if it doesn't have a closet in it.
Okay, so uniform standards of professional appraisal practice say that a closet is required. Now, I've seen, and we've all seen bedroom, rooms that it's likely that the typical buyer would use as a bedroom that don't have a closet. One thing that I've seen that does meet the guidelines is some people have purchased like an IKEA, sort of an armoire that can be included by USPAP guidelines if it's affixed to the wall. So, I mean, it really should be, because you wouldn't want it to, a kid to climb in it and tip it over. Just like, other things that kids can climb on. So if it's affixed to the wall, that can be then altered to be a closet. In the case of where we're appraising properties that were constructed, in 1895 or something like that, a lot of those rooms don't have closets because people didn't have clothes then. Very few homes are constructed now with bedrooms without closets. I mean, that's really doesn't happen right now. They are required, but in the case of where it doesn't exist and it's likely to be used as a closet, we make comments. We try to seek out comparables that have similar situation. And I'm not afraid to pick up the phone and call a realtor and say, hey, look, you listed this property. Did all the bedrooms have closets, or, and I have done that. So does that answer your question? We do the best we can with the information we have.
Yeah, no, I was just working with a buyer this year, and the third bedroom did not have a closet, but it had a little bit of kind of an alcove situation that could be easily converted to a closet. And it was not, thankful, I was happy about it. It was not called out in there. Like, they didn't just classify it as a 2-bedroom. They added it as the third, but there was no comment about the closet being there or not being there. And so I just didn't know. And then I had conversations with other agents about closets. So I didn't know if something had changed, or if that should have been noted in that appraisal or not. I don't.
Nothing has changed. Actually, because that question was posed by Kathleen as something that we were going to talk about today, I went back and reviewed the standards just to make sure that I knew exactly what I was
Okay.
talking about. And they generally are required, but as you
Yeah.
know,
So maybe we got lucky.
I think you did. And just like anything else, basketball players or painters, there are good ones and not so good ones. I've been doing this for 29 years. I've been asked to speak. I have been, told that I'm on, the exclusive panel for several lenders in the area. I have national lenders that I receive regular work from, as well as local lenders. And I'm not perfect either. So that's where we're
Yeah,
at.
okay, but closets are required for bedrooms. Thank you.
Sure.
Do
I think whenever
closets-
you go ahead.
So sorry, do closets have to have doors to be considered a closet? Could it be an alcove and look like it has like a place to hang things and?
Just can't be that picky. No, a lot of people are taking them off these days, aren't they? So
Yeah,
that's okay. They can be put on or taken off as long as there's, something we can sort of call a closet. That's generally, we're here to try to make a deal rather than break a deal. There's a lot of things wrong with a house. I'm working on one right now. It faces an old falling down, rusty industrial building. It's in a floodplain. It hasn't been updated. I'm just kind of having to go through these things. I'm not trying to break this deal, but I need to report to the lender that I'm not sure, that this appeals to a typical buyer. It has some issues. If you have to get flood insurance and you're looking at that, you're kind of starting to shrink down your base of buyers, right? So
thank you.
sure.
I have a question. It's on another aspect. Maybe you were going to cover it, but Steph and I get calls from our agents when they have problems with their contracts. And a lot of times that problem is a low appraisal. And they don't agree with the comps that the appraiser used. They think that they're not relevant. What can a buyer's agent do, or what can a buyer do to help resolve this and get the property together?
Absolutely. You do have recourse. What I would suggest, and what has happened to me a couple of times, is the buyer needs to go back to their lender, and hopefully the buyer's agent can provide some MLS numbers with comparables they think are more appropriate. I have had lenders come back to me with MLS numbers and say, please consider these comparables, in addition or instead of, some of that you have used. And that does happen. Actually, it happened to me like 2 weeks ago because they thought my appraisal was too high. And they wanted me to look at some lower ones. So anyhow, that's the appropriate course of action, is to go back to the lender and say, hey, we disagree with this, and here's our, what we have to verify that. And so then usually they'll send it to their underwriters to take a look and see if some of those comps look like they could be appropriate, and then they'll go back to the appraiser and ask them to review.
Now,
Great.
is that typically the buyer's agent fighting the appraisal, or can the seller's agent also help, I guess?
I think, the seller's agent doesn't usually deal with the lender. So if the selling agent, I mean, I think it would be appropriate to go and communicate with the buyer's agent and say, hey, this deal isn't going to work out unless we get this deal, the lender to agree to this. Take a look at these comps. I think these, we should, if you can send these to, the buyer's lender, we take a look at them and see if you can do that, because they can reconsider. And because this from me, you can say, I know this is the appropriate course of action to take in this situation.
So because typically it's the buyer sending the comps, and then the lender hiring the appraiser, as a selling agent, would it be beneficial for them, like for me to supply comps to you, or do I just send it to the buyer's agent, or just don't even think about it?
You can't really send them to me, we're
Gotcha.
not, the appropriate court, because I don't have to really take a look at them. if it comes from the person paying me who's going to decide, you can always ask for a second appraisal too. But that does get more costly. So having the original appraiser reconsider or review, they ask for an addendum, that I don't get paid $1 more for that. I have to redo and review or confirm what I've done and why I've done it and why I don't think those comparables are appropriate. That market isn't the same as this market or whatever that applies.
Yeah, and generally, if you have to have a second appraisal, that falls on the buyer as well.
Right. So
Gotcha.
so that gets costly. So it's
Yeah.
it's better to use the first one. Another thing you can do as agents is, of course this, come together and see if you can come to some agreement, meet in the middle, have some closing cost concessions or include some chattel. I don't know, but usually we can get it to work by reviewing and communicating and figuring something out.
I do have a follow-up question to these comments. If a buyer wishes to order a second appraisal, that actually does mean an entire switch with a lender, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, you could stay with the same lender, I think. I don't really know because I'm not in that department or in that field. You might have to ask and say, we ask them and say, we'd like a second appraisal. Can we get one if we're willing to pay for one? Otherwise, you may have to change lenders. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'll verify that with a lender. So
Yeah, I'm not sure. Mhm.
I think actually that depends on the lender is what I've heard. If it's like a broker that can use different like investors on the back end, you can switch
Sure.
or have a second appraisal. But if
Sure.
you're working with like a main bank, like a lender, like a Chase or
sure.
something like that, you can't, I think.
Okay.
At least
Right.
that's what I can remember.
Question
working.
about comps. You were mentioning at the beginning a 1 mile radius. Is that in use, PAP, the 1 mile radius? Or is
Not
that just rule of thumb that appraisers have used?
when it's something that I find that the lenders want to see. If I go
Actually, I
outside,
talked to lenders and they've said, no, that's not a requirement.
no, it's not a requirement. And I guess I should preface that with when I'm talking more about city properties.
Mhm.
The farther the farther you go out, the farther that radius is going to be.
I ran into this earlier this year, city of Milwaukee, property in the north side of town. Somebody bought a property, 40,000. They fixed it up with about almost $200,000. Somebody made an offer for the property, but then the appraisal came back at 150. And they said there are no, local comps or anything like that. Yet if you went to Bayview, that would probably easily sell in a heartbeat for 400,000. So how do you keep up the 1 mile? What is a neighborhood, in other words, for that purpose?
Well,
How can you get around that?
location has some, location.
Right.
The location on the northwest side is a different neighborhood. It has a different feel. It has a different cost base. Homes were constructed in a different, much different time frame.
Not really to Bayview, similar. So I'm just saying that contributes a little bit to kind
I
of
guess-
redlining.
I would need some more specifics, but
Sure.
the lender really wants you to stay in that market area. Maybe it's the school system that a typical buyer is looking for.
Well, when you're in MPS, you can go anywhere in the city.
I'm gonna.
I was struggling with this spring. That's why I have all these retorts, but
The
You know,
house could be
I don't
over
mean to pick on you.
for the area. I certainly, the lender wouldn't want to see a city property that was renovated using comparables from miles away from a different neighborhood. They want to see what's in the area, similar size, age, quality, condition, properties. And just because you put hundreds of thousands of dollars into a property, that doesn't mean, cost doesn't equal value.
right. But the problem is that if you're one of the pioneers in an area, it discourages people from investing in an area. If you're like the 10th person that did it, and yeah, the value is proven, then it's easier, but it's hard to be the pioneer then.
That's true. You're taking a risk.
Mhm.
We can appraise above the highest, the highest sale in that market area, but they really do want us to stay in the area. We can always add a comparable from, like that would be like an additional comparable from outside the area to kind of help tuck that in or and explain. But that's generally not what the lender wants to see. So.
Yeah, Milwaukee's very funny. As soon as you get closer to Sherman Park, all of a sudden the values flip. So if you go past 40th Street going west, then values flip and they move up almost, $50,000 to $100,000 more. But east of that is really tough.
Well, that's, but you and I aren't setting the prices. The buyers are setting the prices. Whatever the buyers are willing to pay is kind of ruling the market.
Well, in
We're
this
just
deal, I had a buyer.
players in this.
In this deal, I had a buyer that made an offer, so a buyer was willing to pay that amount. So.
And so it didn't work out?
Right, because of the appraisal.
Okay, now you said northwest side, so I was thinking.
Yeah, near north. It's
be-
closer to near
Okay,
north.
near north. I was thinking beyond 76th Street, north of,
No,
Silver
that's a
Spring,
different
that's the
market, yeah.
northwest side.
Yeah, sorry.
All right, so, without knowing specifics, I'm not sure I can, really dive into it.
Yeah.
As I said, there are good appraisers and bad appraisers. There are different lenders who have different requirements and so on.
Mhm.
My goal is always to make a deal rather than break a deal, but I'm not the only player in this. So, if a deal every once in a while doesn't fall through, I mean, I think we all have to expect that. And there are lots of reasons that might have happened.
Maybe
But,
I can talk to you offline on that.
and certainly getting a second appraisal or providing, additional comparables and asking them to review, as we discussed, might be a way to help, get that deal to go through.
Mhm.
So
Can I ask a question?
absolutely.
Sorry. Hey, can a seller order an appraisal prior to putting it on the market? And would that appraisal report have any standing with the lender for a buyer that would submit an offer?
Okay, so certainly a seller can do that, but I think you and I both know about the same amount as far as listing a property. You can look at what's going on around in the market. You can look at all the photos on MLS, and for the most part, you guys do a great job setting a price and getting somebody to come in. I think it's not necessary. Every once in a while, a seller wants to do it because they really want to get an idea or feel that their property is unusual or something like that. Now, as far as can the lender use that? Some lenders, occasional lenders will, because it's kind of already in the bag and it saves some money. But most lenders, like I'm approved with this lender, this lender, this lender, and I'm not approved with a couple other lenders. I haven't gone through the process and I'm not on their list. So, they don't have my documents. They, some lenders are like Associated Bank. They want like fingerprints. They want a background check, and I've gone through all that stuff with them, and other lenders don't ask for anything like that. So they all have their own requirements. And so if you go to a lender that's never heard of me before, they probably want to use one of their appraisers on their own list.
Thank you.
Hey, Lynn, I have a question. First of all, I don't want to interrupt your presentation. Are you still going through it, or can I ask a question?
I'm pretty much done. I think it's good that we're talking about what's important to you. I gave you some things that were important to me, so.
Thank you. So, based on what Tammy just said, I did have a situation because it is kind of a unique area, more higher end. And so we did do an appraisal in the fall before we went to list in the spring. So it's my knowledge that, and please correct me, like that a year is like the deadline time for different financial institutions to be able to use an appraisal, or that would have some merit. when determining value. So is 12 months still the benchmark, or is it less than that?
It depends on the specific underwriters, of each lender. In general,
Okay.
I would say yes. What they'll typically ask for is an appraisal update. And that's like a mini quickie report where,
Right.
and I've had to do this where I just go back and do some exterior photos, ask some questions, and provide the lender with this little thing saying, no, the value has not declined, or yes, the value has stayed the same, or something like that.
Okay. And then my other question, and I apologize because I jumped on late. I couldn't get on right at noon. But my other question is, and I think you've already alluded to it, you made the comment that buyers are who are determining values today, which because of all this, competition and escalating. So in a kind of a general statement, you as an appraiser, are you feeling that you appraisers are kind of coming up and meeting the demands of where these, buyers are setting the price on homes?
Yes. But I also read, some blogs and things like that, watch the market and things like that. I, consider interest rates. And like when you log into MLS, or when I do, right down at the bottom on the lower left on the first screen where you can type the MLS number up in the top,
Mhm.
it's showing, the list prices, and it's showing the months, and it's showing the changes in list prices, sale prices, and things like that. And you can see now, just recently, that those list prices had been continuing to climb, and they're just sort of starting to arch and come back down a little bit. We have a bunch of factors. The interest rates have climbed, but people still need homes, and we don't have enough, and we have more buyers than than available properties. So that's been pushing the prices up despite the interest rates, right? We all
Right.
know this.
Right.
So yes, if the comps are showing that like I look at, what did they list for and what did they close for? And then I'm looking at months and how that's trending, and running that comparative market analysis. And it's fluid, it does change. And for example, when you look at our winters, sale prices decline typically, the number of closed sales declines typically. And right now we're kind of, we're in our selling season when we do have a few more listings, when we do have, more closings, shorter days on the market, things like that. And that's because we're seasonal. Am I answering your question?
Yeah, you are. I mean, I guess I would think the appraisers, their hand is forced a little bit as to these values and how they've escalated. So it's not like even 10 years ago where you get an appraiser and there's, can be quite a difference. Just because today, with the rise and people offering well over asking, I mean, it's it's a treat when you can buy a house, or when a buyer can buy a house at asking, or even a smidge below. I know that's happening more now in the last 6 months, but I was just curious from an appraiser standpoint, if that's what's going on. I mean, appraisers are meeting the demands of what the market is doing based on these higher offers and prices.
Higher values, yes.
Mhm.
Well, absolutely, because so let's say you and I, are doing a deal on this house, and I do the appraisal and I say, no, it's not worth that much. I don't think so. And I can probably find lower comps out there that make the value fall, or the deal fall apart. But what we know is, because we're in a shortage, and because that's a nice house or a nice market or whatever, or there's a shortage there, we know that another buyer is going to come along and pay that amount. So why would I say that value doesn't exist? I'm only talking about today. It's a snapshot in time. Things
Right.
could, nuclear attack could happen tomorrow. Volcanic eruption could happen tomorrow. We're only talking about today and the snapshot in time that we're working with. So at
Right.
this point in time, you know, the idea is, I mean, the lender wants to make the loan, the lender wants to receive those payments. Everybody's a go on this, unless there's really some reason not to, then,
Right.
and maybe there is, but we haven't uncovered that for this property we're talking about, right?
Cool. No, that's, yeah, that kind of confirms what, I think probably most of us are thinking. So I appreciate that. And you mentioned something in MLS. I'm just curious. You said there's like a table or a graph or something. Are you talking about if you pull up a specific listing or right when you pull in the
Right when-
MLS?
Right when I log in, and I don't know why I would see something different than you do, but maybe I do. Right when I log in, I see quick search across the top and,
Yep.
MLS number and so on. And then down in the lower left, I see a graph that shows list price, contract price and closing price. And then it goes by month. And I see the ramping up in list prices. And now I just am starting to see that arc
Okay,
drop down a little bit.
okay.
I
Very
do have a question kind of expanding on that a little bit. Like, obviously there's more popular price points and different areas in some of the more highly contested areas and price points. How, just speculative, what percentage do you think are not appraising?
I have no idea. I mean,
Okay.
you're giving me such a broad question. I'm not sure I can hone in on an answer.
Like how many, I guess, with the properties you're running into, if there's a percentage, like maybe 10% of the offers are not hitting appraisal or something like that?
Yep, that's exactly what I'm seeing there. You see that it just looks like it's starting to arch down the blue line, I believe it is, on top. Just starting to drop a little bit. But you can see how it had gone up. I'm sorry. I only know what I appraise, so it's hard for me to answer that question. Right now, I'm thinking as far as what I'm doing is probably 5% or less.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Lynn, I think you do have a different login with MLS unless I'm just not seeing it.
Robin, let me show you.
No,
So,
it's on the screen.
yeah,
Okay,
so for
I'm looking-
So for everybody, when you're logging into MLS, if you go to the left-hand side in this blue link that says MLS, you can toggle in between that. So if you have it set to home, it might look different than when you have it set to MLS. So this is the MLS's standard home screen. So Robin, you would see that on the
Oh,
left-hand side.
got it. Now I
Um,
can see it. Yeah,
Perfect.
thank you. I appreciate
That's what I was talking about.
Okay, thank you so much.
I
Thanks,
don't
Steph.
have I don't have anything else unless someone else does.
Yeah, I have a question.
Go for it.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, so when you're looking for square footage, what do you do when it only has a total square footage and doesn't have above grade and below grade
Okay,
in the
so
data?
it's hard to answer that question without knowing what municipality you're in because they vary. But the wire data usually provides something, and sometimes, like in Richfield, it doesn't. So then assessordata.com is one whatever website that I pay for. I pay $1.60 for every lookup. And so and I get charged monthly. I will go to that and it'll provide all kinds of information. So usually I'll have to go to the municipality, the assessor or whoever they farm out to.
Oh yeah, because it's just looking at like probably like looking for comps, and then you see some, but a lot of them will not have that other information. They'll just have a total square footage.
So I like the city of Milwaukee property assessment is online. Just have to know how to find it. Accurate Appraisal and Associated Appraisal both provide free information for a lot of municipalities like Grafton, Menominee Falls. You have to pay for, that's Grota, but I have a list of
Right.
where this information can be obtained that's been verified.
Okay.
You can call me anytime and ask me if you can't
All right.
find one. I know them all. Anything else?
Yeah, are there any other questions?